Hi everybody, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. So today I'm going to talk to you about God, a nice easy topic for this episode. No, but I do want to talk about the concept of God because it is a term that means different things for different people, and it's a term that I need to define as much as I can if I'm going to continue making videos on this channel that are going to make sense to people. And this is part one of a two-part series. So I've already referred to God a few times on my videos as the object of religion, of spiritual practice. And that's not something that I wanted to do necessarily, because there is a lot of ridiculous ideas out there that have the label God attached to them. And I refused to even say that I believed in God for many years, because I didn't want my ideas about the spiritual nature of existence to be associated with such a loaded term, which had so much falsehood associated with it. But try as I might, I can't avoid referring to the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth that I aspire towards as anything other than God. There's simply no other word in the English language that allows me to convey the meaning that I'm trying to convey, and which evokes the sorts of feelings of wonder and awe and reverence as the term God. So it's become unavoidable for me to talk about God, because that is the word that English-speaking people associate with what I'm talking about when I talk about the ultimate nature of things. But needless to say, as you've probably already picked up on, my idea of God is very, very different to how God is commonly understood and often represented in the mainstream, particularly by the churches. And that will become apparent as this video goes on. So first, it's necessary for me to, as much as I can, define what God is, which in some ways is impossible. But when I talk about God, if you've watched my previous video on the 4 yogas, where I talk about the concept of Brahman that comes to us from Vedantism, that is very, very close to my concept of God. But the problem is there's two schools of thought as to what Brahman refers to. There are some in Hinduism who think of Brahman as a supreme being, as a personal deity, and there are others who see it as an impersonal force or an impersonal principle. And in my view, Brahman, or what I would call God, is an impersonal force. It's the impersonal concept of Brahman, which I associate with what we in the West call God. And that is an idea that is closely related to the Tao of Taoism, and it is also closely related to the Buddhata of Buddhism. It is the ultimate reality, the eternal truth behind and within all things, and the transcendent reality of which everything else is a part, and arises and passes away within. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about God. I'd prefer the term divine or the divine, but God tends to be a more powerful, more evocative term for that ultimate truth, that ultimate reality. And so that's what I often use when I'm talking about these things. And in contrast to the very sublime, impersonal ideas of what might be labelled God, of the Tao, of Buddhata, of impersonal Brahman. In contrast to that is this sort of caricature of the personal God, the personal idea of divinity as this sort of invisible man in the sky sitting on a cloud with a white beard watching everybody. And it's the object of ridicule in this day and age. And often it's the monotheistic religions who are caricatured as adhering to this view of God as the invisible man. And there are certainly a lot of monotheists who do seem to be under the impression that that's the way that the universe works. But even if you read the Bible, even the Old Testament, and you look at and you read between the lines of monotheism, it seems to be hinting at an impersonal idea of God. I mean, the first clue is if you look at the Islamic tradition and all of the beautiful architecture in the mosques of the medieval period and all of the astonishing geometric patterns that adorn those buildings. The reason why that kind of form of art was encouraged in the Islamic world is because it was forbidden to create an image or a visual representation of Allah. It was blasphemy to depict him as a human being-like figure. And this isn't just something that came out of the blue. It has its antecedents in the Old Testament. When Moses receives the law from God in the book of Exodus, God makes a point of saying to Moses that his people, God's people, are not to worship graven images. And this commandment, this rule that was put in place by God, is often used to describe God as a jealous God who can't stand the idea of other gods besides him being worshipped. And if you read the book literally, that does certainly seem to be the underlying message. But if you have a deeper understanding of what that prohibition on worshipping other gods and graven images really is, it's something much deeper. Because if it was just a matter of simple jealousy of other gods, then God would command that only graven images of himself be worshipped. But we see in the Pentateuch that God even forbids the creation of an image of himself. When the Holy of Holies is created as the place where God is worshipped, there is no image of him that is erected. And even the place where he's said to physically dwell is shrouded behind a curtain. And the priests of Aaron that minister before the tabernacle are only allowed to enter that Holy of Holies once every year in the calendar. And so, far from a God who demands the spotlight, we seem to have a God who insists on remaining unknown. And if you look deeply at those verses in the Bible and what they seem to be pointing towards, it is that the correct view of God is as something that is unknowable. And the reason why creating graven images is wrong, the reason why idolatry is wrong, is because it's setting up a representation of God that is a degradation of true divinity. It is an inferior image of true divinity. It cannot capture the ineffability and the sublimity of true divinity. And it's really trying to make something that is a transcendent concept fit within things that are of the world and images of ourselves and our own wants and needs, and worshipping that. And so that is the true idolatry. The true act of idolatry is not setting up a statue and worshipping a statue. The true creating of the idol occurs in the mind. It occurs with the invention of an idea, which is an idea of God that is comfortable to us, which is not too intimidating to us because it's easy to understand and it's familiar. It's a father figure, or it's some kind of cosmic king, something that we can relate to and feel comforted in believing in because it's so similar to what we know in the world. But that's not what God is. God is beyond anything that we can define. And that is why I believe there was a prohibition on graven images in the Bible. Because you can't capture the essence of an unknowable divinity by creating an image of it. So that's it. That's part 1 of this 2-part series on God. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.